When it comes to business, what fears do you have?
You're only as strong as your next project, as your next client. The better we do our work, the sooner we're working our way out of work. This destiny is not a given. It is a function of hard work and perpetuity. And regardless, I think, of how you arrive to an opportunity, it's how you handle it.
So for someone who doesn't know you, how would you describe yourself?
I guess above all, probably a pretty fierce advocate for Central New York and for Syracuse, with the exception of spending 5 or 6 years in Atlanta for college, and shortly thereafter, I've pretty much been a lifer here. And the blessing and the curse is that I'm the sixth generation of a family business. So Hueber-Breuer Construction's been doing construction here since 1872. So I came up. I like to joke, sweeping floors and hanging doors since '94. So it's been in my blood for a long time, and it's definitely a big part of my identity and our family identity. And it's very hard sometimes to separate, between the two. But I'll say that I'm, a fiercely passionate Central New Yorker who's very fortunate to, work with his family and be in a position to, enjoy a nice lifestyle as a result of, the success of our business, and very much surrounded by, my friends and family and all the activities I get to enjoy in this region. So that's me in a nutshell.
Have you always been involved in the business? You said sweeping floors and hanging doors. Like, have you been around doing things?
It's funny. My son Max, who is 14, going on 15, this summer will be the first summer he gets to kind of get immersed in it. The rules have changed a little bit with OSHA, where you cannot work on an OSHA job site until you're 18 years old now. So Max won't be able to be like out in the field the way that I was when I was 14 years old, but he will start to be in a warehouse and get a little more immersed. Like most kids, and increasingly, if you look at the metrics around it, like, kids want jobs now. The 15, 16-year-old kids are really searching for jobs, which is neat. But anyway, so I think
they want to be productive.
Yeah, exactly.
Contribute.
And I think they don't, they maybe one of the good things about social media is there's a lot of attainment that is featured in social media. Take away, maybe how flashy some of it is. There's still a lot of there's a lot of attainment there, a lot of success that's highlighted. So I think some of that can't help but sink into kids these days. So plus, he eventually wants a car and he wants to be able to afford to put fuel in it. So he knows all those realities. But anyway, so I was very much of that mindset at age 14, 15, 16, and got immersed in it early on. And as was my father's experience. And it's a great opportunity.
Well, did you get dragged into it as a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, or did you also
you're dragged into it at 6:30 in the morning, that's for sure. No 14-year-old wants to be on the job site that early, but that's just the nature of the work. Most 14-year-olds would much prefer to be sleeping in, but no, I when I look back at the experience of working with, in some cases, family generations of field labor, field staff that we've had on our jobs, I have such fond memories of some of the superintendents that I reported to when I was 15 years old, who then I got, to work with and help direct, later in their careers. So it's an interesting cycle and an interesting progression. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, so fast forward to today, as the president of Hueber-Breuer, is there any core leadership skills or principles that you put in place?
Well, I think certainly you start with the recognition, right? We are a team, and our team obviously starts at our senior team, but our management staff, our on-site staff, and then the countless subcontractors and all the field staff that make it up. I mean, there's never enough recognition to go around, because it is a challenging business and everything is so governed by schedule and by budget, and you need everybody to be playing their part in that orchestra to make it all come together and deliver that performance. And if anything, it's that you develop an appreciation for everybody's role. When you start at that level, when you start sweeping floors for a company like ours, I think you see every element of those facets of the progress and the success.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, for those who don't know, well, you were telling me, so we're in the Dietz building right now.
yeah,
You're telling me that you're part of this building, right? Well, can you give me some background of that? Just talk
sure.
to me a little bit more about that.
As you probably well know, this was Matt Paulus's brainchild, and Matt and my brother looked at this as a co-development opportunity with Matt's father-in-law, who's since passed, Larry. But this project is pretty emblematic of what we see as the great redevelopment opportunities of this region, right? Another one is the Moyer Penfield Lofts on the north side that we just finished, the one with the house on top of it. I mean, there's great historic bones in this community, these buildings that are now seeing this rebirth and a new life. Former manufacturing facilities, these typical 4-story red brick, wide span timber frame buildings. Like, there's nothing that's cooler than putting one of these back into good use. And they can be very challenging because of, environmental brownfield issues or historic tax credit issues, or just frankly the structural status of the building. And, what, if you want to preserve a historic tax credit, you have to be very mindful of what needs to be preserved and still keep the functionality of the building, the thermal performance of the building, things like that. So these are tricky buildings, and yet what a treasure, right? And what a gift to be able to preserve something like this. So it's an honor to do that kind of work.
So, because to me, it's the only way I can relate, like, what you do is thinking about this building. So talking about this building, talking about the core principles and leadership and kind of everyone has a piece in it. How many people or how big of a project and ins and outs does it take to make something like this happen? Yeah.
It's a 300-person effort. Now only 6 of those might be Hueber-Breuer employees, right? So we typically don't self-perform a lot of the trades work here. There was a time when we did. The work has become very specialized. So now you have an electrician who may even be separate from the guy who puts in the security system and the low voltage lighting, right? It's become that specialized. But 100 years ago, it was you would hire a contractor and they would have a group of guys who basically did all the trades. As that evolution occurred, not just here, worldwide, we shifted really towards the management approach. We became construction managers and general contractors and provided less and less of the trades work over the time. So, nowadays on a job like this, when it's in full construction mode, we would probably have, 1 or 2 superintendents and then a couple odd job carpenters and laborers. But other than that, it's all subcontracted. But the net of that is, 250, 300 people to deliver a job like this. And they all, come and go at different intervals, but it takes an army.
Well, what are some things that you've learned over the past decade or however long you want to take it?
It is an extremely reactive sector to be in. And it takes a different mindset. When I think of different roles and different industries, there's a certain, predictable dependency to a lot of jobs. You come in and you do a generally predictable task every day. The value of our role, frankly, if a project is going well and the subcontractors all show up on time and the material's there on time and everything's moving fine, our job's pretty easy. But the reality is it never happens that way. You ask anybody who's taken on even the smallest project, how'd your bathroom renovation in your house go? Generally say, it took an hour. It took a week longer than I anticipated, or a month longer than I anticipated.
Yeah. Well, the joke is always laying over budget.
That's right. So it's like, well, did you meet your schedule? Did you meet your budget on your kitchen renovation or your bathroom renovation? No one ever tells you, we were on time and under budget. I mean, for us, those are bonded, contracted responsibilities. We don't get the opportunity to say, well, it's just going to be 20% over budget, or it's just going to be 10% late, 2 months late. We have contracts that demand those things. So the reality is every day you are reacting and responding to whatever's gone off the track that is making that end deliverable, less possible. So if you're in this industry, particularly in the management of this industry, and you expect to come to work and you're going to do what you set out to do on that given day. You're going to be disappointed every day because the reality is it's always the plan B. It's always the reaction. It's always the response. And that's the value of our job. Because if it all went according to plan, we wouldn't have a job. So you kind of have to frame it in that mindset.
Okay. So I have a much smaller business, right? We're 8 people here. I always hear either you work in the business or you work on the business. So my life pretty much right now is just reactive. Like I do want to, I want to do all these things, but then you show up, someone's sick or whatever, and you have to be reactive.
You're constantly working on the business.
Yeah, right. Or you get an email from a client who wants this or that, and you have to figure it out. So keeping that in mind, how do you still focus on growth and growing a business?
You have to be very intentional with trying to carve out the time to think about it. And it's something I struggle with. I'm sure it's something that every business owner struggles with. Knowing that you never catch up with the list. How do you carve out the time to think about the big picture? So you're not alone. It doesn't matter what size the company is. You're always dealing with that time management piece of it. And you have to struggle to be in the moment sometimes, to celebrate the little victories, because you're on to the next task, the next hurdle, the next solution. It's hard sometimes to say, all right, let's take a breath. Let's honor and recognize where we've come, recognize the people who got us there. I mean, that is always in the back of my mind. Are we doing enough of that? So maybe with older age, more gray hair, I'm starting to recognize more necessity around being in that moment. And that applies to a lot of facets of life, right? That's not just business. That's family too. It's the old John Lennon, life is what happens while you're busy making plans. And that's the case with family and business too. So,
yeah, I tell you, it's just super hard. You spend 100% of your day being reactive, and then you got to figure out another 100% to do all the other stuff, right? I think there's like different stages in my mind. Like at first you have to be hustle, just like thinking about being reactive and growing at the same time. And then hopefully I go on very long walks, and that's where all of my like brainchilds come in. And then I just hopefully that those are, I feel like I'm just like shooting darts at a dartboard, and then hopefully one of them lands. And those are the times that I think about growing the company.
Right. So for you, it's a discipline of saying, no, I'm going to put down this pencil. I'm going to go out and take a walk. Right?
Yeah.
And that's your moment.
It's almost like a must, because things are just changing so quickly, especially in media. And I'm sure that you've seen a lot of things change in your industry as well, but you have to innovate. You have to think about it, or at least be okay with what that pivot looks like or what that move looks like. And to me, I can only do it when I go for long walks and I put on some good music and think about those things.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I have those moments too, and they're generally, being outside. This time of year, I try to spend a lot of time on a paddleboard, and in the wintertime, I try to spend a lot of time in a tree stand and things like that. They give you some time to reflect.
So talking about work culture a little bit, how do you develop a culture at Hueber-Breuer? Like, what does that look like? Do you put a lot of time into thinking about culture when you're thinking about retaining and retracting employees?
It's funny. I think we all spend a lot of time now thinking about workplace culture and metrics around those cultures and generational shift in those cultures. And I think to our benefit, just the shift, I think, in cultural expectations around what work life looks like. Generationally, if you believe what you read about generational views on the workplace, I think a lot of people are looking for higher purpose and mission-driven workplace, even in a for-profit environment. And I think our work culture has always been synonymous with community, and I think that has kind of started to bear a lot of fruit with our recruitment and retention. That it resonates with folks that while we could be maybe a little provincial, we're kind of localized, maybe to a fault. A lot of that it resonates with, well, how does it affect and benefit our community? And so I'm proud of that. I'm proud that the people in leadership roles in our community, in our business, they all also are very passionate about different causes in our community. I think that's a good reflection on kind of our workplace culture and our workplace conscience. So I just think we're very fortunate that those paths are kind of aligning, and generationally how that seeks to benefit us.
Yeah. Do you push your team to be more involved in things like that? How did that develop?
I try not to push it. I try to encourage it, certainly. It's by no means is it a prerequisite or is it a requirement, but above all, I think you just try to walk the walk. You try to provide exposure to causes and to events. I get a call, once a quarter from an organization, which, can I take a leadership role or a board position? And I have to say no more often than I can say yes, just by my own time constraints. But I also try to think about people in my organization who might, number one, be passionate about the same cause, and number two, have the time and the capability that they can add to that cause. So, I try to promote those roles, and for the most part, I think we do a pretty good job with those pairings. But at the same time, it's not like someone's bonus is based on, hey, how many not-for-profits do you serve on a board for, or what causes are you passionate about? So it's just a nice coincidence, I think.
Yeah. Do you find that team members are looking for more than just a job?
Absolutely. And I don't think that's specific to Hueber-Breuer, to 325 or anybody else. It's just the way of the world right now, right? That there's so much out there that feels soulless, and it's too bad. So, I think back to a couple decades now of being immersed in the charitable and philanthropic parts of this community, and there's so much goodwill, there's so much good intent, and there is youthful enthusiasm that that defines a lot of that intent. And so, how do you harness it? Not just at Hueber-Breuer, as a community, how do you harness it? And how do you bring young people back here? And in a lot of ways, I just think that circumstance and coincidence, nationally, internationally, are working in our favor right now. So we got to harness it.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a really interesting shift for me. I'm always a person that kind of just puts your head down and just get it done. Like
right.
A job is a job. Like you need to put food on the table kind of thing. I think it's just how my parents were and how their grandparents were. And I just picked that up. And I ran 325 starting it that way, where I was like, this is just a job, guys. Like we're just going to come here. We're going to make great videos. But at the end of the day, it's a job and it puts, food on your table kind of thing. And then like a year or two ago, something switched, and maybe just talking to other people or reading other books or just thinking more about it, there needs to be some kind of purpose or value or why are we doing this? But it took me, I'm turning 40 this year. It took me 38 years to learn that it can't just be a job, because eventually that'll burn out, and especially people that are working for you or working with you
yes,
will definitely burn out. Does that resonate with you?
There's no doubt, and the burnout factor is very tangible, I think, in our industry. It is very demanding, very, very stress-filled. So I think you hit the nail on the head, that you've got to have higher purpose, period, and hopefully you can find it in the workplace. If you find a job you love, you never work a day in your life. Is that what they say? But don't get me wrong, I feel like our work is work, but it has a nice tie, a nice dovetail with a lot of the community efforts. So equally rewarding.
For sure. All right. I want to ask you some big questions now here.
All right.
The
existentialness.
Exactly. What is the best advice you ever received?
I'm not sure it's advice so much as it was maybe an evolution of a conversation. A lot of people know the name Norman Mailer, probably a lot more relevant as an author and as an activist in like the 70s, and kind of renowned for some of his relationship with like Muhammad Ali and a couple other people. And I had this opportunity going back a number of years ago in the Rosamond Gifford lecture series, where Norman Mailer and his son, John Buffalo Mailer, had just written a book together, and it was a conversation on some of these existential things, right? And he's talking with his son, and it was recorded in this book. The book was called The Big Empty. Well, he came to Syracuse, and I got to have dinner with him as part of the lecture series thing. And we got into this great conversation. It happened to be a dinosaur barbecue, which was kind of a fun place to be doing it. And there was a point in the book where Norman Mailer, who is a pretty renowned liberal media type, he's talking about the value of small business ownership, and he's talking about the small businessman, small businesswoman, and how they're kind of the lifeblood of American culture because of basically their creativity and their fortitude, right? That they are betting on themselves every day. And those words in that conversation have always kind of resonated with me because, you know, it speaks to creativity and ingenuity. It speaks to differentiating yourself in the workplace. And, you know, it also he uses the word that, you know, the small businessman can be a son of it, but it's because he is betting on all of those things. And my father jokes that, you know, he never has to go to Turning Stone because he bets his livelihood every day on our ability to deliver on schedule and budget and those things. And, you know, Norman Mailer and Jim Brewer are pretty different people culturally and politically maybe, but they both get it right in that regard. You know, it's like, yeah, you gotta differentiate yourself. You got to bet on your own creativity and hard work and fortitude. And I try to live those things every day. When I think about it politically nowadays too, and I think about that individual and what he stood for in terms of like liberal policies and liberal politics compared to his respect for, you know, what I'll say are pretty conservative or Republican ideals around private business and being a small business owner. Like, I think that's a good snapshot on America today too, right? Like, we have this juxtaposition of cultural identity and political identity, and the reality is a lot of people are in the middle, and I'm firmly in the middle. And I think people are afraid to say that nowadays. I think people are afraid to be proud of it. You know, you have to be too polarized nowadays. Mm-hmm. So I reflect on that conversation and on that ideology a lot. You know, you have one? What's your best advice?
My best advice?
Yeah.
Well, see, I'm in my grind mindset right now. So to me, it's just do the work. I quoted this guy before. I don't want to quote him. I feel like I want to be like a fanboy for Gary Vee right now, Gary Vaynerchuk. And I'm not a fanboy of his, but one of his favorite things that he did is he went on stage and he only did this like once or twice, but like I remember watching this video, really stuck out to me. And he's telling everyone, hey, if you want to do marketing, this is what you got to do. If you want to do branding, this is what you got to do. You got to do this. It's real simple. It's not rocket science, this. And he stands on stage and he just like stops. And he's like, you know, the reality is nobody here is going to do it. Everyone here just paid $500 for a ticket to come see me talk, and then I'm going to leave, and they're all going to be excited to be here, and you're not going to do it. And he's just like, I'm obsessed with the idea of how do I actually get people to take the step and actually do it, actually start creating. So my advice would be that actually create, stop listening, stop getting caught into the indecision fatigue, and just like actually create. And
there's tones of that same Norman, that differentiation of creativity, right? Mm-hmm. That's what wins the day.
Yeah. And just doing it, taking a chance, betting on yourself.
There you go.
And that's huge.
There
you know, it's scary.
Of course,
you know,
but it's the only thing you can truly be passionate about, right? Being true to yourself. So,
yeah,
that's there's a lot of the same tones there.
Yep. So, how would you define success?
Well, I think it comes back to that word of, you know, community and how entwined we are with community and the fabric of the community. I mean, we get to participate in a lot of projects that make our community better. You know, just last night, my son rows crew at Syracuse Chargers, so we're out at Long Branch a lot. And last night I was on my paddleboard waiting for Max to finish up his crew team practice, and so paddled out in the middle of the lake. It was dead calm. I mean, there wasn't a breath of wind out in the middle of Onondaga Lake at 7 p.m. last night. And I'm looking across the water at the amphitheater, which, you know, 8 years ago or whatever it was, didn't exist. You know, and you think about how many people in the past even 2 weeks have gone to Kenny Chesney or Hosier or some of these great concerts. And like, I love going to the amphitheater. I love being there, and it's kind of doubles down the pleasure and the pride of knowing that we participated in creating it, you know, things like that, or the Nexus Center at, in Utica, or the Expo Center at the fairgrounds, or feeling like you have a direct role in things that make the community better. YMCA projects. I mean, projects like that, they resonate in some cases for generations. And so that's my definition of success, that you made the community better. And then some of the more intangible things, I think, with trying to help with workforce, trying to meet the goals of, you know, stepping up to build a more capable and a more diverse workforce. That is a very frequent topic right now, and especially in this Micron moment, and how we train more people and more diverse people to step up to these jobs. So, we take a lot of pride in both of those things, and they don't come easily. So,
yeah. When it comes to business, what fears do you have, and what do you do to overcome them?
Well, maybe the first and most immediate one is just the longevity piece, right? I don't want to be the one to drop the baton. But one of the topics we started on, just talking about the recognition for the team. As the team gets larger, and as we get maybe further away from the bricks and mortar deliverable of the trades work, I want to be more intentional around making sure that recognition trickles down. And I have a lot to be thankful for with the hundreds of people who perform for Hueber-Breuer, and we don't often get the chance to recognize it. So whenever I have the opportunity to say it, I want to say thank you. So thank you to all those people.
Why is that important to you?
Because I do feel an inherent responsibility to maintain the livelihood of hundreds of workers in this community. And you have to fight for those opportunities. And the only reason that we're in a position that we can compete and contend in those is because of our past success. So I owe a lot to my predecessors, and I owe a lot to the people that are working on these jobs in this very moment, delivering successfully to ensure our longevity, ensure our success.
I think recognition is huge.
Of course.
They say that if someone says that you're ugly once, it takes like 1,000 of people tell you that you're handsome or pretty, right? To kind of counterbalance that. We do this thing, and we don't do it enough, but anytime a client just like, we love that video or whatever, I'll copy it, I'll put it into our Slack channel, our communication channel. And I think, and I hope that really helps our directors. Is we're creative. We're all sensitive souls in the creative field, so we really need that recognition and be told that we're doing a good job, because we put a little bit of our soul in every video and every photo, everything. So to be told that it's good is huge for us.
Oh well, the affirmation piece is big for everybody, right?
Yeah, and I never really thought that was like a big thing either, because to me, I'm like, don't you know the video is good? Like, don't you know what you did? Like, that's really good. But until
and you
someone
have proof positive in terms of
it,
number of people who have seen it and liked it, and right, I mean, all that stuff in social media, you get that gratification.
But there's something different coming from my mouth or the client's mouth, or I'm sure from your mouth, or there's a big difference of who it comes from and that recognition. So that's really interesting that you're putting a thumb on that.
No, it is the thing that scares me the most, that we don't do enough of it, and therefore do you lose out on culture and buy-in as a result of it. So. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm trying to think of this quote that I heard, but it was basically like I think it was Jeff Bezos, but basically said the difference between burnout and hard work. I'm going to misquote this like crazy here, but basically, burnout comes because you're doing the hard work, but you're not getting recognition. Where hard work and gratitude comes from doing the hard work, but getting the recognition.
Yeah. Well, and recognition helps to eliminate worry, right? Whether that worry could be around job preservation, could be around, whatever. Am I doing the right thing? And I'm going to miss whoever it should be quoted, but there's some quote out there also of it's not work that kills a man, it's the worry, right? That the friction is the rust upon the blade, and then the hard work is just the well-oiled machine, and it's like I think that's really true in construction, that as long as people aren't necessarily worried, that they know there's a plan intact, that they know there's a future for them, that that eliminates a lot of concern and a lot of preoccupation. So I think you're absolutely right.
What advice would you give your younger self?
We touched on a little bit earlier, just to be in the moment. I mean, if there's anything that my very patient wife, would say, it's like, you gotta settle it down sometimes. I mean, it's very hard, especially in a family business when if I'm at a family dinner with my dad and my brother who I work with all day long, it's hard to turn it off. It's hard to not say, recall the thing that you didn't get a chance to speak to them about earlier that day. And it's hard not to think of everything as a list. Everything in my work life is a list. It's a set of benchmarks and things that need to be done by a certain time. So when you are fortunate enough to have a time to take a breath outside the office, be in the moment, and I need to tell myself that now. I certainly needed to hear it 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be a challenge for me. And I think frankly, for most type A people, I know I'm not alone in that. And that's just a function of a busy work life and a private business owner. So
it's not really advice.
Yeah,
It's
right?
more of is that a warning almost?
It's definitely cautionary, but it's, it's in going back 30 years, could I have been more intentional in thinking about how I would have tried to plan for it, how I would have tried to carve out my time in my day and, do more yoga. I don't know what I would have done. I just know I'm not doing enough of it now.
Yeah. I'll always do the same with my wife where she's like, how was your day? Like, what happened? I'll be like, this happened, this happened, this happened. I'll be like, all right, just one more thing. I'm going to tell you one more thing. And then that'll be it. And I'll tell her that one thing. And like 2 minutes later, I'll be like, oh, you know what? There's this other thing. I got to tell you this one more thing. And then we'll just keep doing that for the whole night. It's hard. It's hard to shut it off. But, and I think it comes in phases. I think you have to really carve out that time and be intentional. But it's got to be harder for you because of the legacy. For me, if it breaks and fails, then that was just me being dumb. But for you, I feel like it's a little bit more.
It's just like I say, the blessing and the curse, and I say that obviously tongue in cheek. But of course, you don't want to be the one to drop the baton. But at the same time, it's like, what a tremendous opportunity. When I came back to Syracuse at age 22, frankly, at that age, you're looking at it with a little bit more ego. It's like, well, boy, look at the nepotism of coming back here, and what do people think of that? And you don't put enough stock and credence into just what it takes to maintain the status quo. In our business, and your business is the same. You're only as strong as your next project, as your next client. If we do our work well, the better we do our work, the sooner we're working our way out of work. So it's like you're only as strong as your next project and the continuity of that work. So, at age 22, I wasn't thinking about it that way. I'm like, I'm going to go back to Syracuse, which at the time seemed like a pretty sleepy town, and to take on this, this destiny. It's a different mindset when you've lived that for a while and be like, holy cow, this destiny is not a given. It is a function of hard work and perpetuity and commitment. So regardless, I think, of how you arrive to an opportunity, it's how you handle it, right? And how you keep it alive. But like I say, it's an honor, and I'm really fortunate to get to work with my dad and my brother. And even, when I first came back here, my grandfather was still routinely coming into the office, and I've had an aunt who's been in the business, and my sister's had some slight overlap with us too. And so it's just like, it's a really cool opportunity. And now the prospect of bringing on, Generation 7, even if that just means, sweeping up the warehouse, I mean, it's still, it's another generation of involvement. So it's really an honor.
Oh, I love that. All right, wrap up every podcast with 3 final questions.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite book or a book that you would recommend to our audience?
Say the academic in me. I can't say one specific book, but the academic in me has always been like a Faulkner and a Southern Lit fan. So As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner is probably my favorite literature book. Pure fiction book, just mindless reading. I think The Power of One by Bryce Courtenay. That's a great book about South Africa and apartheid. And in terms of, I'll say, nonfiction and maybe, kind of the self-help book that I've gravitated towards recently, it's from the Axios media guys. It's called Smart Brevity. It really speaks to, how to equip yourself and your team to articulate things succinctly and effectively. And it's something that, in all facets of our life, I really enjoyed it. And naturally, it's a short read. So that's good, even for my short attention span. So those are the 3 that I'll throw out there.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out. I like that one. I find this question particularly interesting for you because you've been doing this, as you said, since 14.
Yeah.
What keeps you passionate? What keeps you going?
Community engagement, and that's a very broad topic. But I mean, what I'm doing here in this moment is certainly engagement with the community. It's allowing me time to reflect. It's allowing me time to learn from somebody who's in a similar position and has so many parallels they can express from other people you've spoken to, and just kind of being considered in that same breath is great. But I get as much out of community roles, Landmark Theater or Community Foundation or SUNY ESF. I get as much out of that as I do in, I'll say, my 9-to-5 role, and very often those roles overlap and intertwine. So, I think community engagement keeps me passionate. Things with my kids' school, things like that.
Cool. All right, last question. What excites you most about Central New York today?
Well, if you're asking this question routinely, I think it's going to be hard to stray too far from this this Micron moment and the upside, right? The rising tide, whatever you want to call it. Like, clearly we're all seeing it, and it's encouraging. I certainly I very much subscribe to what I'll say is kind of the Rob Simpson Center State CEO analysis of it, that it feels like for 30 years we've all been doing the work to get to this opportunity. We've all been trying to promote the community and reinvigorate kind of these Rust Belt antiquities. And now it's coming, and we have to shift the focus to how do we accommodate it? How do we build the housing? How do we build the infrastructure? How do we train the people? So what excites me is the upside. I'll say on a personal level, what excites me is probably one of the same things that led Micron to choose this community. It's the natural beauty and the natural resources of this community. I love being on that paddleboard last night on Onondaga Lake, of all places, a place that 30 years ago you would have been a lot more concerned about dipping your toe in that water. So, I think for the same reason that we're becoming increasingly relevant in the reshoring marketplace of the American economy, it's because we have pretty nice climate and 4 seasons and a lot of natural water resources. And, within 20 minutes of downtown Syracuse, you can be outside in any number of, nice natural environments. So that's what excites me about being here.